We learned today that Brigitte Bardot has died. She was 91 years old. Bardot was a star of the still image as well as the moving one before becoming an animal rights campaigner and a controversial cultural figure. CBS's Elizabeth Palmer has a look back.
On December 28, 2025, the world was stunned by the news that Brigitte Bardot had passed away at the age of 91. The announcement came from the Brigitte Bardot Foundation and quickly spread across international news agencies. There were no fanfares, no lengthy statements, and no disclosed cause of death. The departure of Bardot unfolded quietly, true to the way she chose to live for many of her final decades, withdrawn from the spotlight, yet never erased from cultural memory. For the global public, Bardot was once the face that defined an entire era of post-war European cinema. The woman who forced standards of beauty, sexuality, and female representation to be rewritten. For France, she was not merely a movie star, but a social phenomenon, celebrated, contested, and constantly compelling society to confront difficult questions about personal freedom, morality, and the right to choose one's own way of living. When international media reported on Bardot's death, they did more than revisit her iconic roles, because she had been desired by the world. Yet Bardot herself chose to leave cinema at its peak, devoting much of the latter half of her life to animal protection and to positions that deeply divided public opinion. Her death, therefore, does not close a career. It forces a reckoning with the full arc of a life lived outside prescribed boundaries, even when that choice came at a cost. Brigitte Bardot is gone. But the question of who she truly was, and why she never agreed to remain within a safe, settled definition, remains unanswered. The death of Brigitte Bardot did not arrive as a sudden shock. It marked the end point of a long process of withdrawal, a life deliberately narrowed, consciously detached from the public sphere, and clearly defined in the final years of her life. In her later years, she all but vanished from public life. She lived in seclusion in southern France, primarily in Saint-Tropez, a place once inseparable from the most glorious period of her career, but which later became a space of total retreat. Bardot didn't attend events, didn't appear before cameras, and made no effort to reposition her image or revive her fame. Her health declined noticeably during this period, particularly from 2023 onward. According to medical sources and French media, Bardot began to limit her daily activities, drastically reduced outings, and almost entirely ceased direct contact with the press. Any information about her condition was conveyed only indirectly through the Brigitte Bardot Foundation or close family members. In late September 2025, Bardot was admitted to Saint-Jean Hospital in Toulon to undergo surgery for a serious medical condition. The official statement confirmed only that she was hospitalized and received medical intervention without disclosing a diagnosis, surgical method, or long-term prognosis. After the operation, Bardot was discharged and returned to her home in Saint-Tropez to recover under regular medical supervision. In November 2025, she was readmitted for further monitoring and treatment, indicating that her recovery was not fully stable. Sources reported that her physical condition had weakened, mobility was limited, and social activity had almost entirely ceased. Nevertheless, her family and the Brigitte Bardot Foundation maintained a consistent position. No medical details were released, no frequent updates were provided, and direct media access was not permitted. Following this final course of treatment, Bardot returned home and continued to live under in-home medical care, avoiding public appearances until her death in late December 2025. The decision not to disclose the cause of illness or the progression of her condition was not a momentary evasion, but rather reflected a choice Bardot had upheld for decades, to retain absolute control over her private life, even during its most physically fragile moments. Brigitte Bardot's death, therefore, was not the end of a retreat, but the final point of a way of life chosen very early on, leaving the center while still powerful and remaining on the margins until the very end. In her final years, Bardot did not seek forgiveness, nor did she attempt to redefine herself. She simply continued to live in accordance with the decision that had stunned the world more than half a century earlier. The death of Brigitte Bardot did not provoke curiosity about power or wealth. Instead, it compelled a reconsideration of a rarer choice, the way a global icon deliberately narrowed her material life and organized her assets as part of a retreat that lasted more than half a century. At the time of her death in late 2025, Bardot's total net worth was independently estimated at between 50 and 70 million USD. For Bardot, money was never a shield. It was a tool for moving away from the center, step by step, and by design. From the outside, this wealth was never ostentatious. There was no empire of high-profile real estate, no sprawling investment network designed to extend influence, and no evidence of accumulation meant to maintain public dominance. Bardot's assets were instead condensed around a few fixed points, each tied less to expansion than to successive stages of withdrawal. At the center of this portfolio stood La Madrague, the seaside property in Saint-Tropez that Bardot purchased in 1958. Originally a modest fisherman's house, La Madrague was gradually expanded not to impress, but to enclose gardens, separate living quarters, animal shelters, and protected spaces. It was not a venue for hosting power, but a refuge from public scrutiny. Bardot lived there until the end of her life and, according to multiple sources, transferred ownership of the property to the Brigitte Bardot Foundation, transforming a personal sanctuary into a component of her animal protection legacy. Beyond La Madrague, Bardot owned a small number of other properties, including an old villa near Le Castellet, acquired after her first marriage and sold in later decades. These properties were not held long-term, never became defining symbols, and were gradually removed from her life as her retreat became more absolute. She also maintained a Paris apartment during the early years of her career, but did not retain an urban residence after leaving cinema behind. Her personal vehicles similarly reflected no taste for luxury as status. Bardot did not build a car collection as a statement of rank. The vehicles associated with her name, from the Renault Floride and Lancia Flavia to the Citroën 2CV, appeared as natural extensions of particular life phases, not as curated displays. Even models considered prestigious in their time were used functionally, without emphasis on excess or accumulation. More telling than the assets themselves was their flow. After founding the Brigitte Bardot Foundation in 1986, a significant portion of her wealth was continuously redirected. Auctions of personal memorabilia, film costumes, and individual rights were organized to raise funds. Estimates suggest that Bardot contributed millions of dollars to animal protection over several decades, preventing her personal net worth from growing along the typical trajectory of an icon of her generation. Thus, when Bardot's estate is viewed in retrospect, what emerges is not a complex material legacy awaiting division, but a deliberate process of self-contraction. Her assets were not assembled to preserve power, but to sustain a life on the margins, where control did not come from wealth itself, but from the decision to step away from the spotlight while she still possessed enough influence to do so. The death of Brigitte Bardot did not merely generate a wave of mourning. It also triggered a dense chain of reactions from politicians, artists, international organizations, and global media. In the hours following confirmation of the news, Bardot became a leading subject across major news agencies, not as a star who had just passed away, but as a cultural phenomenon requiring reassessment. Among the official statements quoted verbatim in English, French President Emmanuel Macron was the first to reposition Bardot as a national symbol. In a message published by Reuters and widely circulated internationally, he wrote, "Brigitte Bardot was a free woman who embodied the audacity and spirit of France." At the same time, French Minister of Culture Rachida Dati emphasized Bardot's historical stature, calling her a figure inseparable from France's collective memory. She was an icon among icons, whose influence went far beyond cinema. From international organizations, the most explicit responses came from animal rights advocates, the field that defined the second half of Bardot's life. PETA quoted its founder Ingrid Newkirk in a statement released to the international press. Brigitte Bardot used her fame to fight relentlessly for animals who had no voice. Millions are alive today because she refused to look away. The SPA, Société Protectrice des Animaux, also cited by Reuters, described Bardot as a figure who reshaped how French society viewed animal rights over several decades. She transformed animal protection into a public cause in France. Within artistic circles, statements in English were fewer, but still noted by international media. Obituaries and tributes in outlets such as the BBC, The Guardian, and the New York Times consistently referred to Bardot as one of the defining faces of post-war European cinema, and a woman who forced the world to rethink femininity, fame, and withdrawal. Even when not accompanied by lengthy personal quotations, the way international media placed Bardot at the center of cultural analysis made clear that she was viewed as a singular case, not a purely beloved star, but a figure who consistently provoked divided reactions. Notably, among this wide range of responses, very few were purely sentimental or nostalgic. Bardot was recalled with evident caution, celebrated as a symbol of freedom, yet acknowledged as a controversial figure, praised for her work in animal rights, while also revisited through the lens of statements that once deeply divided opinion. International media did not attempt to smooth these contradictions, and it is precisely this refusal to do so that allows Bardot to persist as an open question, even after her death. After the initial wave of reactions, one thing became increasingly clear. Brigitte Bardot was never a figure who could be neatly closed off with a farewell. Every statement, every article written after her death quickly circled back to a more fundamental question: how Bardot was formed before she became a symbol of freedom, before she became a divisive figure, and even before she chose to leave behind the world she had once conquered. To understand why Brigitte Bardot always lived outside established frameworks, in art, in her personal life, and in her final choices, it is necessary to go back much earlier, to a time when she was not yet BB, not yet an object of desire or controversy. That was a childhood shaped by strict discipline within a post-war Parisian bourgeois family where control, propriety, and silence exerted a stronger influence than the glamour she would later encounter. Brigitte Bardot was born on September 28, 1934, in Paris's 15th arrondissement, into a Catholic bourgeois family of solid social standing. Her father, Louis Bardot, was an engineer and businessman. Her mother, Anne-Marie Moussel, came from a long-established insurance family. Outwardly, it was a stable, comfortable household that conformed perfectly to mid-20th century French upper-middle-class norms. Behind that orderly facade, however, lay a rigorously disciplined environment in which personal emotions were not encouraged to surface. Bardot's childhood was governed by strict rules, how to dress, how to speak, how to sit, how to behave, all carefully regulated by her parents. She grew up alongside her younger sister, Marie-Jeanne, commonly known as Mijanou, in a family atmosphere that Bardot later described as proper but cold. Her father's severity, combined with her mother's close supervision, meant that her early years were marked more by a sense of surveillance than of protection. From a young age, Bardot also struggled with poor eyesight, amblyopia in her left eye, which forced her to wear glasses for many years. This contributed to her shyness and reserve, and she often avoided contact with strangers. In childhood photographs, Bardot does not appear as an outgoing or striking child, but rather as a thin, quiet girl who seemed constantly to shrink back from the surrounding world. Music and movement became her earliest escape. At the age of 7, her mother enrolled her in ballet, not out of a clear artistic ambition, but because ballet was considered an appropriate means of instilling discipline and physical control in a well-bred young girl. Bardot quickly showed talent and was admitted to the Conservatoire de Paris in 1949, where she studied classical ballet under the Russian choreographer Boris Knyazev. In the rehearsal studio, she discovered a different kind of order, strict yet rhythmic, a space where the body was allowed to speak in place of emotion. Alongside ballet, Bardot attended the Institut de la Tour, a private Catholic girls' school. There, her separation from the outside world became even more pronounced. Her teenage years passed within a sheltered framework, with few friends and limited social interaction. Bardot later admitted that she felt alienated even within what was supposed to be a safe environment. The first turning point came in 1949, when Bardot appeared on the cover of Elle. The image of a young girl with natural beauty, still untouched by sensuality or provocation, unexpectedly opened a door her family had never mentally prepared to face. At that moment, however, Bardot still remained firmly within the orbit of ballet. Cinema was not yet a dream. Fame was certainly not a goal. Those years of discipline and silence did not prepare Brigitte Bardot for a brilliant artistic ascent. On the contrary, they left her permanently wary of other people's gazes. As a result, when cinema entered her life, it did not arrive as a dream to be pursued, but as an unexpected force, both seductive and unsettling, that quickly slipped beyond her control. In the early 1950s, Bardot entered film almost passively. After her Elle cover in 1949, she was invited to audition and soon landed small roles in Crazy for Love, 1952, and Menina, The Girl in the Bikini, 1952. These films did not demand complex acting from her. What made Bardot stand out was her natural presence, an unguarded body, a gaze that made no effort to please the camera. French cinema at the time still leaned heavily on formality. Bardot appeared as a discordant element, not yet clearly defined. That discord became a cultural earthquake in 1956 with And God Created Woman. Her role as Juliette Hardy not only catapulted Bardot to international stardom, but also forced Western cinema to confront a radically different image of womanhood, one that did not ask permission, did not repent, and was not punished for desire. The film was harshly criticized for its audacity, yet that very backlash amplified Bardot's magnetism. From that point on, she was no longer simply an actress. She became a cultural symbol. By the late 1950s, Bardot appeared in a succession of films that were both entertaining and norm-challenging. La Parisienne, 1957, reinforced the image of the modern woman. The Night Heaven Fell, 1958, and Babette Go to War, 1959, revealed her ability to combine sensuality with humor. The culmination of this period was The Truth, 1960, in which Bardot portrayed a woman judged by an entire moral system. The role earned her a David Di Donatello Award and marked one of the rare moments when critics acknowledged her acting ability beyond the sex symbol label. Entering the 1960s, Bardot deliberately sought out directors with more reflective sensibilities. Jean-Luc Godard's Contempt, 1963, placed her at the center of a work that explored both marital breakdown and the rupture between a person and their own image. Bardot was no longer merely an object to be seen. She became a character conscious of being watched. This is often regarded as her most self-referential role, where cinema and her personal life nearly overlapped. Alongside film, Bardot also developed a significant music career. Throughout the 1960s, she recorded more than 60 songs and collaborated closely with Serge Gainsbourg. Tracks such as Harley Davidson and Bonnie and Clyde did not demand vocal virtuosity, but instead established a style, cool, detached, and resistant to excessive polish. For Bardot, music was a less pressurized space than cinema, one in which she could exist without having to perform. Yet her constant presence across multiple cultural fronts gradually led to exhaustion. Intense shooting schedules, relentless media pursuit, failed relationships, and the sense of having her image appropriated pushed her further away from acting. The psychological crises she experienced during the 1960s were not isolated incidents, but symptoms of a prolonged conflict between the individual and the symbol she had become. By the early 1970s, Bardot remained one of Europe's most famous faces. But instead of continuing, she chose to stop. In 1973, at the age of 39, she announced her complete withdrawal from cinema after Don Juan, or If Don Juan Were a Woman. There was no farewell campaign, no summative role, no negotiation with the public. The decision did not arise from failure, but from a refusal to continue being defined. Brigitte Bardot's career, therefore, did not end in decline, but in a conscious act of severance. She left while her image still carried weight, and it is. Precisely this choice that ensures her career continues to be revisited, not as a closed memory, but as a question that has never been fully answered. The decision to leave cinema in 1973 is often described as a bold professional rupture, but looked at more closely, it was the direct consequence of what had accumulated off-screen. Relationships pulled relentlessly into public view, roles imposed rather than chosen, and the growing sense of being possessed by her own image. Brigitte Bardot married for the first time in 1952 at the age of 18 to director Roger Vadim. Vadim was both husband and gatekeeper to her earliest film opportunities. In those initial years, Bardot accepted a shaped role, a familiar form of security for a young woman raised within discipline. But when And God Created Woman premiered in 1956 and propelled her beyond France's borders, that structure quickly collapsed. Fame radically altered the balance between them. Vadim was no longer the guide, and Bardot no longer had a marriage behind which she could take shelter. The separation unfolded quietly, leaving Bardot very young, globally famous, and exposed to the public gaze. A few years later, Bardot sought a different rhythm of life through marriage to Jacques Charrier. By then, she was already Europe's defining sex symbol, and this marriage bore the marks of an attempt to return to normal life. When her son Nicolas was born in 1960, the hope for stability became more pronounced than ever. But motherhood under constant pursuit offered no anchoring. Bardot did not hide her sense of panic in the face of a role she had never chosen in silence. When the marriage dissolved just a few years later and custody was awarded to Charrier, distance formed not through open conflict, but through prolonged silence. a quiet absence that followed Bardot for the rest of her life. By the mid-1960s, Bardot appeared alongside Gunter Sachs, a relationship bound to a world of luxury, yachts, parties, and performative freedom. The marriage stood in stark contrast to what she had just endured. No obligations, no domestic framework, only formalized liberty. Yet, that very display hollowed out the shared life. In spaces flooded with light, Bardot continued to be looked at more than she was touched. When the relationship ended in the late 1960s, Bardot had traversed the full spectrum of emotional life, from dependence to duty to excess, without finding refuge. In the final years before leaving cinema, Bardot was barely able to sustain any attachment without injury. Fame ensured that every relationship, no matter how private, was dragged into the light. Psychological collapses emerged quietly, not narrated by her as melodrama, but registering as signs of prolonged exhaustion. When Bardot stepped away from the screen in the early 1970s, it was not the end of a career, but a severance from a way of living that had penetrated too deeply into her private life. Only many years later, once the world had ceased demanding images from her, did Bardot marry for the last time, to Bernard Dormal. With no cinema and no red carpets, this relationship existed outside any center of attention. Bardot was not seeking redemption or late romance. She was seeking a structure of life sufficiently closed to prevent further harm, a choice made late, but the first that was not shaped by the gaze of others. After leaving cinema in the early 1970s, Brigitte Bardot did not enter a new chapter in the conventional sense. There was no gentle transition, no attempt at image repositioning, and no reflective pause to revisit past glory. The withdrawal was decisive, almost absolute, and was immediately filled by another commitment, one that was non-performative, required no audience, yet demanded constant and sustained presence. By the mid-1970s, Bardot was already directly involved in animal protection campaigns in France and across Europe. She did not appear as a film icon, but as a blunt advocate, frequently relying on handwritten letters, personal phone calls, and private meetings to exert pressure on officials. In 1977, images of Bardot in Canada protesting seal hunting sent shockwaves through international media. There was no script and no staged imagery, only a woman standing on the ice, holding the body of a seal pup, a moment that marked an irreversible shift in her life. From that point on, Bardot gradually severed all ties with the entertainment industry. Advertising contracts were declined. Invitations to retrospectives, honors, and comebacks were rejected. Instead, she concentrated her financial resources and personal energy on specific campaigns, opposing fur farming, fighting cosmetic testing on animals, and advocating for an end to bullfighting and recreational hunting in France. Letters bearing Bardot's signature were sent directly to ministers, heads of state, and leaders of international organizations, not in a tone of appeal, but of interrogation. In 1986, the Brigitte Bardot Foundation was established at a time when she had nearly vanished from public life. The foundation did not operate as a personality-driven organization linked to its founder's image, but as a field-based intervention network. Rescue, care, transport, and relocation of abused animals. Bardot auctioned off many personal assets, including film costumes and memorabilia, to finance the foundation. Properties in Saint-Tropez and surrounding areas were converted into shelters for abandoned animals. Her daily life revolved around caregiving, monitoring rescue files, and writing advocacy letters, a repetitive enclosed rhythm with no spectators. This commitment did not remove Bardot from controversy. In the course of her activism, she repeatedly used harsh, sometimes extreme language, particularly when confronting policies she believed condoned violence against animals. Statements on society, religion, and immigration in texts and open letters from the late 1990s onward led to multiple convictions and fines. Bardot neither retracted her views nor softened her tone to suit public opinion. In her perspective, animal protection could not be separated from a more severe worldview about humanity and power. Throughout the 2000s and 2010s, even as her health declined, Bardot maintained a central role in major decisions within the foundation. Campaigns opposing seal hunting in Canada, protecting domestic animals in Eastern Europe, and advocating a ban on horse meat consumption in France all bore her direct imprint. Handwritten letters, confirmed by close collaborators, continued to be sent even as Bardot reduced travel and face-to-face contact. She no longer appeared on the ground but remained present in every decision that set the organization's direction. Brigitte Bardot has departed, but France and the world have never ceased to argue about her. In the cultural history of the 20th century, few women were so intensely celebrated and yet subjected to judgment for nearly their entire lives. Bardot was not merely a film star. She was a cultural moment, one in which beauty, freedom, and rebellion appeared without asking permission. In less than 2 decades on screen, Bardot left behind 47 films, dozens of recorded songs, multiple European Film Awards, and an image that permanently altered how women were seen in cinema. Yet these numbers alone cannot explain the weight of her name. Bardot did not conquer audiences through polished acting technique, but through raw presence. A woman who did not conceal desire, did not retreat into imposed morality, and did not perform in order to be accepted. When she left cinema before the age of 40, Bardot did not leave behind the familiar void of nostalgia. She left a shocking silence and used the rest of her life to build an entirely different legacy. Decades after the stage lights faded, the name Bardot continued to appear not on movie posters, but in legal files, advocacy campaigns, and animal rescue networks stretching across Europe. The Brigitte Bardot Foundation, along with the land, assets, and resources she left behind, does not function as a memorial, but as a living system. Bardot did not become an easy symbol to love. She divided opinion, provoked controversy, and repeatedly unsettled the public. Through her views, her language, and her refusal to adjust herself to the times. Yet it is precisely this that prevented Bardot from being reduced to a harmless image displayed in collective memory. She did not live to be agreed with. She lived to be herself, to the very end. Brigitte Bardot is not remembered because she was perfect. She endures because she dared to step away from the center while power was still in her hands, dared to choose solitude over comfort, and dared to leave behind a legacy that does not need to be loved in order to exist. Do you remember the first moment Brigitte Bardot appeared on screen and made the world stand still? Share your thoughts about Brigitte Bardot in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe to continue joining us as we revisit the people who changed the course of popular cultural history.